You all know that we've been talking about AI for literally decades. There's something pretty miraculous happened, I think, around about November 2022, which really caught the attention, captured the attention of the general public. Not only the general public, but captured the interest of governments, policymakers, and doomers, also the imagination of innovators and entrepreneurs. So when we think about AI, when you think about AI, what sort of perception do you have? Is it a utopian future? Dystopian future? Is it confusing? There's a lot of noise out there. Maybe it's something in between. And I guess more importantly, can you keep up? This thing has really accelerated. It's going at a rate of knots, and as you'll see later, I've been trying to catch up with where we are, so I've got a handle on, get an understanding of where I think the world is at, as we do the TechWorks AI economy. But just to state the bleeding obvious for everybody here, AI is already part of our lives, and it is set to be part of our lives for the foreseeable. So, welcome to the launch of TechWorks AI. We very much see this as a collaboration of collaborations. So what we are doing, we will be collaborating with our members within our communities, but also very much part of the UK innovation system. And our aim is very much to be a significant player contributing to the UK's national innovation system. So hopefully this will work. There we go. So I'm going to say a few things. I want to take you on a bit of a journey. I see there's some old friends here, so hopefully this will be a reminder of where we've come from, and you'll recognise some of the milestones that I've put here. But there's also new friends too, so this will give you a very good introduction as to who we are, what we do, and why we do it. And also really marking today as another milestone. So where do we start? Whenever I talk to my team, in fact, in my children, I say, whenever you start something new, you've got to start with questions. And I personally feel that we don't ask enough questions before we really get underway today, because things are moving so fast. So very much inspired by this chap. This chap is Rudyard Kipling, who I think is deceased. I think I'm fairly safe in saying that. But he says, one of his famous poems, he said, "I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when and how and where and who." And so with that in mind, with that as a kind of structure, I hope that by the time that you leave today, you'll get a much better sense of why TechWorks AI, what TechWorks AI, who is TechWorks AI, how, where, and when is TechWorks AI. I think the next slide is good. So very quickly, just to run through the history of TechWorks, how we got here today. Many of you will know that we didn't start life out as TechWorks. We started life out in 1996 as the National Microelectronics Institute. And very much at that time, our centre of gravity was really helping the fabs with their productivity. So skills in fabs, semiconductor manufacturing here in the UK. Around 2004, which is when I entered the frame, nearly 20 years ago, the board of NMI at the time said we need to do something more for the design community in the UK, semiconductor design community, and that's where I first started here to look at what could we do for this industry, and we very much built a program around the design value chain. Along the way, we recognised some of the issues we were having with skills, so in 2010, we were very much part of leading the formation of what is today seen as the UK Electronic Skills Foundation. We also started to have conversations with industry, and industry started to change around us. And then people from industry were saying, "We love what you're doing, but we are," one particular space we were talking to was automotive. We're automotive, and your chips, your semiconductors. So we said, no problem, we can create something for you. This is the birth of ASIN, the Automotive Electronic Systems Innovation Network. Hopefully does what it says on the tin. Around that time too, we set out to have a forward-looking conference called the Future World Symposium. We ran several of those. We haven't run one of those since 2014, but the reason why I mention it here in this chronology is I hope many of you will recognise the person on the slide here, a chap called Simon Knowles, who is one of the co-founders of Graphcore. I'm delighted to say we've got Nigel, who's going to be speaking later from Graphcore, and hopefully give us some insight into their journey since they started. Now in 2015, I got detailed over to go and look at what was going on in cybersecurity in IoT. So for the last 9 years, I've been looking at that, but I do remember Simon's talk vividly. In fact, I replayed it again recently in preparation for today. And what he said back then is so very true today. It's a timeless piece, I think. But what I will also say, when he was speaking and I was hosting the event, it really stimulated me because I could understand the implications of what he was saying. I could see how this thing was going to map out. And it was really quite disconcerting at the time. Fortunately, I'm not a doomer. And certainly after what I've been doing recently, I agree with Nigel, AI is not going to kill us anytime soon. And then, actually what I missed out here is the 2014, as the industry was changing, we realised that we needed a different strategy. So this is where we evolved a strategy called Connected Communities, and the idea was that we would create specific communities around technical themes, challenges here in the UK. At that time, I remember attending an NMI board meeting, and there was a question from one of the board directors, and they said, do we need to change our name? And I said, yes, but not just yet. Well, actually, just not yet. In 2017 was when we did change our name, and we changed our centre to really embrace what we call deep tech. And I'm going to have to put my specs on. It's like, oh no, I'm going to turn around. Hopefully you can still hear me. We define deep tech as transformative engineering products and solutions derived from innovations in fundamental maths. I think that's quite important with AI and science. What we then did is said, hang on a minute, we've still got to look, we've got to do something with the NMI design community. We then branded that as TechNess. That's what it is today, but we've recently recruited a new member of staff. Steve is here, who is actually running that community. And a spoiler alert, we will be giving that a new name as we go forward to make it more appropriate for the audience that we hope to attract. Now, like any respectable organisation, which we are, of course, we have a mission and we have a list of things what we do. Now, what I hope you're not doing, I hope you're not reading those words, because I've pulled out a few words which I highlight, which I think are really, for me, the essence of what we do. And that is collaboration. That's the first thing. We're all about collaboration. Obviously, we're about technology innovation. And I think where we've really played strong is grassroots engineering. So we would know people who are on the test bench, who actually make the chips, who design the systems for cars. And I think that's been a real differentiator. But a simple form for you, this is the way I like to think of where our centre of gravity is. And it really is about innovation and engineering excellence. So we see ourselves as an active intermediary which does these things. We facilitate, we stimulate, we catalyse, we organise, and we do what I call servant leadership for various deep tech communities today, as up on the slide. For a simple reason, just so we can perform better as a nation in the delivery of innovation and engineering excellence. So part two, I wanted to set the day up, give it a flavour, give a sense of where we see, and more particularly where I see AI as it stands today. As I mentioned, we were early doors back in 2014 with this machine intelligence. But I've been away, but I'm back. And last year we ran a webinar and a workshop to really look at what could TechWorks do. This is because we saw in each of our communities AI was having an impact, having an effect, but we couldn't just do AI in any one of the groups. So we decided that actually we need to have something above all of the groups which is what we call TechWorks AI. So if this is a slide that I used in preparation for one of the workshops, and I was interested to understand what our good friends at Gartner see as where AI is, and they talk about modalities. I'm not talking about multimodal AI, I'm talking about these modalities in being data-centric, model-centric, application-centric, and something I quite like the sound of, which is human-centric, beneficial AI. I'm on the same page as Elon Musk. I am a speciesist. I'd like to think it's going to be beneficial to us. But I've highlighted 3 points on the slide there because there are many flavours, as you can see, in the Gartner hype cycle. The first one is to say to our friends over at ASIC, good news, autonomous vehicles are coming out of the trough of disillusionment. Apparently, we're getting up to the slope of enlightenment. We're mentioning our good friend Elon Musk. If we believe him, he's going to have robo-taxis in August. Next one I will point out is AGI. AGI apparently is 10 years out, more than 10 years out. We're not quite at AGI. In fact, Sam Altman said just recently, nobody has seen AGI. 10 years out for me really says we don't know. And I've been around tech long enough that we used to talk about things we didn't know when it was going to happen, be 20 years out. This is 10 years out. I've also seen people talk about 5 years out, and that really, for me, just indicates how fast things are traveling. Okay, thank you, Chris. And what took the world by storm back in November 2022? Generative AI. What's really interesting to me, looking at this chart, generative AI apparently is sitting at the peak of inflated expectations, about to fall into the trough of disillusionment. We'll see. So, again, in preparation for the launch of TechWorks AI and to really understand what we can do and try and get a sense of this very noisy situation we're in, where it's very difficult to really detect the signal from the noise about all of the hype that's going on, I've resorted to student mode once again. As I say, this is the third time I've set up a new community for TechWorks. There's some books that I read. In fact, what I would commend to you, if you're interested in learning about the players in AI, the book, which is about genius makers, is a really good introduction to some of the characters, including Jeff Hinton, as we'll see in a moment, Jan LeCun, and a bunch of other guys, and also a kind of a very simple introduction to the technology. Another really good introductory text is Melanie Mitchell's book on artificial intelligence, and of course the Kissinger-Schmidt book on the age of AI, if you really want to go back into the philosophical underpinnings of AI, you'll find it in that book. And one I read just recently on AI ethics. In fact, we'll get Paula up later. When I originally spoke to Paula, I said to her, I was hoping to read this book by the time I got to speak to you, but I hadn't quite managed it by then. But I have, and the only caveat I have for that book is the last chapter. It smells a bit of propaganda to me, but the rest of it is pretty solid. And of course, we've got Nigel here today, our very own Nigel, who's going to talk about his book on how AI thinks. So the last time I did a degree, which was 2008 now, the general advice given at that time was don't read books, read papers, because things are moving so fast. So of course I've been reading books to play catch up. I've been looking at papers, and what's really interesting is that the paper that I've highlighted here, as well as giving me a really good understanding of what was contemporary going on in AI, talks about how fast things are moving. So this is the preprint. People can't keep up. The peer review process cannot keep up with the rate of progress that we're seeing. Even the preprints are, there's some numbers up there which I think are there. Yeah, there we go. 55,700 entries on Google Scholar. So this thing is moving at a rate of knots, and that's really quite concerning when you consider this technology is actually still quite fragile. And of course, I've just added a doomster headline in here for you. Apparently they're already calling out the we're going to run out of data by 2026. So I don't believe that for 1 second. I mean, I've been looking at the IoT space for the last 9 years, as I've said, and what I can tell you, IoT generates an awful lot of data. So, what else? Where are we? What are our expectations? What are our expectations around artificial general intelligence, and when's it coming? Well, as we've seen, Gartner says that we can expect it to take more than 10 years. Earlier last year, late last year, we had a workshop, as I mentioned, and we created a paper that came out of that. We identified 8 areas that we could potentially move the needle on with the TechWorks community. One of the things we decided that we weren't going to do, and that was define AI. That's somebody else. However, I think it is instructional to understand what sort of characteristics we mean by artificial intelligence. And I'm taking comments from Jan LeCun on a recent podcast. He said, LLMs are not going to take us to AGI. What they can do is very primitive. So there were 4 essential qualities of intelligent behaviors that he identified. Number 1, the capacity to understand the world. In his view, we don't get that with LLMs. I think from what I've seen, I tend to agree. But what I would say, my talk comes with a warning. This is what I know today, and I'm acutely aware of what I don't know. The ability to remember, retrieve things, the ability to reason, and the ability to plan. So what I also wanted to do in here is put a little chart up that showed that all of the hype that we've been seeing, or all of the frenzy that we've been seeing around generative AI, we have to remind ourselves that actually generative AI is just a subset of deep learning. And deep learning is a subset of machine learning. And guess what? Machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence. So I thought it was quite poetic that Jan is actually French. He doesn't like the term artificial general intelligence. He prefers to talk about advanced machine intelligence, which is AMI. And as a French speaker, I like the sound of mon ami. That kind of gives a counterbalance to all of the doom stories. So I tend to agree that from what I've seen, and again, changed my mind, but to me, artificial general intelligence is a long way away. This is really about advanced machine intelligence. So for a bit of fun after listening, I paused the podcast when I was listening to Jan describe how this auto-regressive nature of natural language generation works. And he was explaining how hallucinations are possible because of that. So I stopped and I decided that I was going to have a bit of fun. I'm going to have to write this. Just by the way, I learned a very interesting fact about old people recently. I found out they were born about the same time as me. So I decided, understanding how transformers work, to pick some operative words and just make up garbage. And I said, this is actually the Microsoft Copilot. It could have been any one of the ChatGPT. So I said, the cat donkey fed up some sky muzzles to staple some gum. Can you write a plan for that? If the wheel is 4 foot stationary. And it had a go. He said, sure, I can do that. I'll cut to the chase here. We even got down, for my plan, it told me that I would need 42 individual doves to satisfy that garbage that I chucked in. And of course, it's not even 101 computer science. We all learn garbage in, garbage out. And as you may have picked up on the slide there, I picked up this screenshot from Jan on his Twitter. He was talking about bias in, bias out. So this general concept, whatever you put in, beware of what you may get out. So for me, whilst I don't take anything away from the phenomenal progress that we've been making with AI, we're still not quite, from what I can see, what I would call true artificial intelligence. We have a machine intelligence. It's an incredible tool, and that's why I've added this bit at the bottom here as well, this phenomenon called prompt engineering. I'm sure that you've had a play with ChatGPT and see what it can do, and I bet you've had mixed results, as I have. But understanding, the important thing is that once you understand it's a tool, then mastering that tool, you'll get much better results once you do that. So I've just put this slide up here. Again, a course on prompt engineering, which I actually did look at to help me use AI better. But fundamentally, by the very heart of it, is linguistics. Right. I could talk about so many things, but I wanted to pick a couple of examples, and I'm going back to my roots, really, in the semiconductor space. And many of you will know this guy, Jensen Huang, who's the CEO of NVIDIA. You'll have probably seen that NVIDIA have taken over the mantle of being the number one semiconductor company on the planet now, taken over from Intel, who's been up there for many years. And their fortunes have been utterly transformed because of AI and their GPUs. But I was looking at some of the numbers, bearing in mind when I did my startup, and okay, it was the late 90s, but we were making big chips and we thought 70 million transistors was a lot. I just looked at the transistor count on these things. Look at that big chip, 80 billion transistors. 80 billion transistors, I just can't really get my head around that, but that's not even anywhere near where we're at. Jensen said recently, we need bigger chips, we need more chips. So they're innovating. They've stitched two die together on this piece of technology, which is called, I think it's chip on wafer on substrate. And look at the transistor count of that. 208 billion transistors. We've got some verification people in the audience here. I don't even know how you go about verifying 208 billion transistors. It's phenomenal. And of course, the performance metrics go up as well. Not only is, but wait, that sounds really impressive. And then you look at what else is going on in the space. Well, stand aside, NVIDIA, we'll see your 208 billion, we'll raise you 4 trillion. We're going to go wafer scale. There's this company called Cerebrus. So I know there's an awful lot behind that, and a lot more detail, and the semiconductor engineering, we want to go into lots more aspects of that, but that wasn't the purpose. It was really just to try to show how frenzied and how complex these systems are getting. But I then had this note to say, but wait. I remember as a young kid, I thought I came up with the original Knock Knock Who's There, Doctor Who joke, and then you find out that everybody's thought of that is obvious. As I was doing some of this stuff, I was thinking, do you know what, all of those transistors, each GPU somewhere between a half a kilowatt to a kilowatt of power, and understanding you need thousands of these things. Well, that isn't going to scale, is it? Well, it is scaling at the moment. So then you look at the implications of that, and it turns out my good friend Elon Musk again made the joke that I thought I'd made, Transformers for Transformers, and he said it first. It's not so funny, but that's what we're going to need. So for me, what does it mean? It's well, this is the way the world is going, but it does feel a lot like ARM and Intel for me. We've got these massive systems, huge amounts of power, very large transistor counts, and what I know, because I've been here for a while, because as I say, I was born the same time as old people, I just see an awful lot of opportunity for innovation, an awful lot. So it occurs to me, we'll see more talked about analog computing, we'll probably see more about new memory architectures, we'll certainly see more about photonics and heterogeneous integration. All of these themes that certainly from the semiconductor land, we've known for a long time. So what I wanted to do was, in 2015, we had a summit here at Bletchley, the IoT Security Summit. When I talk about those times, I mention a word that I chose to describe the situation that we started. And that word was egregious. That's what we saw at the time. In fact, my associate David Rogers said at the time, we can't go on like this. It was egregious. So again, as history is rhyming, it feels like that way to me. We're back at Bletchley for a launch of something amazing here. What word would I choose? This is what I say. It's absolutely insane what I see. And when I say that, very clearly, this is going to be transformative. Over the years, I've heard a lot of people talk about their technologies being disruptive, but in many cases, it's never really been disruptive in the sense of Clayton Christensen's innovator's dilemma. But of course, AI is absolutely going to live up to that, I believe, and it's all dimensions. Yes, the technology, clearly societal, the economics, I think, are going to be interesting, especially when we look at the economics of the power that's used, the energy that's used, the efficacy of the models that we're generating. That's before we even get into the ethical and the legal side. And I've left politics to last. We don't really want to be doing politics at TechWorks AI, but seeing as everything gets politicized these days, it may be difficult to resist. So that brings us to today, the Launchpad. Welcome to the Launchpad. One of the things that I call the epiphany of the obvious for me when I started looking at cybersecurity was that all technology is dual purpose. Never thought about it that way before, never needed to, because I was always interested in the innovation side. But when you start looking at security, you start thinking about actually how can people use this technology against you, i.e. not its intended use. Well, I think it's very clear to see that AI can be used against us, so it is very much dual purpose. As we launch TechWorks AI, one of the focus that we will have, or the key focus to start with, will be trying to engineer trustworthy AI. Again, this is where we come from, engineering excellence and innovation. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit later in the day. I want to say we, not me, better people than me are going to be talking about this.